Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome into another episode of the GC Show. I hope you all are doing absolutely amazing here on this Monday afternoon, and I hope you enjoyed the little week off last week. We'll call it, I guess, a little spring break, but we're back. So, today we're talking about the what if question. It's a question we ask all the time, in different scenarios in life. Like we ask the what if question about things of the past, like what if this went differently? You ask it all the time in sports, what if this controversial call went the other way? What if the Seahawks ran the ball? What if Nazem Kadri didn't injure Jordan Bennington during the 2022 Stanley Cup playoffs? Still a little salty about that one. Well, wearing a Florida State shirt, what if Florida State didn't get left out of the college football playoff? I think that was 2023. It's like weird with the calendar year in college football. Anyways, or you might ask the what if question about things of the future. Like, what if this goes the way that I'm hoping, or what if this doesn't go the way that I'm hoping? And you just ask the what if question. And it's something that's like difficult to talk about because technically what if scenarios aren't real, if that makes sense. You ask what if about the past, like what if this happened? Well, it didn't actually happen, so it's not real. And you ask what if about the future, and that thing you're asking what if about, it isn't technically real because it hasn't happened yet. So the what if questions, it takes us out of the present moment. So what we're going to discuss today is, how can we take the what ifs and the what if questions in our life and give them to God? So that's going to be the main question I want you to think about as we go throughout this episode. So, of course, these episodes, they're for everybody, but specifically toward the end, I'm going to zone in and talk to people specifically who are thinking about, they want to start something. There's something they want to do, but they have not done it yet. Like there's going to be a part at the end where I discuss that, where it's going to be zoning in specifically on those people. So if that is you, make sure to tune in to the end of this episode. So our verses today comes from Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. You may know these verses, but for those of you who don't, Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight. So before we really get into it, there's a common, or not a common misconception, but I think there's a misconception with this verse, and it's that, you kind of take little parts of it and put them together. You might see, trust in the Lord with all your heart and he'll make your path straight. So you think, since I believe in God and I'm a follower of Christ, everything that I want to happen will happen. And that is not necessarily true. Whenever you trust in God and you fully submit to him, you say, his way is better and whatever happens is God's plan. And I'm just going to submit to that and trust that he has an amazing plan. And whatever happens is God's plan, and he will show me which path to take in life. And with that, whenever you fully trust in God, and you fully submit to him and you lean not on your own understanding, you're not wandering anymore, but instead you understand what God has for you, and that is the straight path in your life. When God makes your path straight, he's showing you which way you're supposed to take in life. So you may be wondering, how does that really connect to the what if questions? Don't worry, we will tie that back in starting right now. So go back to the what ifs, right? They can be good or they can be bad. They can, make you anxious and think about what if, and get you questioning, or they can be, I don't know, I guess motivation for you. Who knows? So the example I have about, asking what ifs, it's my example, which I don't necessarily like using me as an example because I feel like I'm putting myself on a pedestal and I don't like to do that. But I felt like this example kind of fit perfectly. And it was, the example of me whenever I was deciding to start this podcast. So we kind of set the table here. I was just praying and asking God, what is it that you want me to do? I'm ready to do what you have for me. And I just asked, I would pray that prayer a lot. And then, over time, the idea of Christian podcast would pop up. But for a year, when I first prayed that prayer, and then to the time when I actually started the podcast was about a year. And I kind of got distracted with life a little bit, like things happen and all that. And, I think part of it, the reason why I didn't start earlier is I would ask these questions. First off, I was confused. When I got that idea of Christian podcast, I was just like, oh, that's cool. Like, I'm not good at public speaking. Like, that's never going to happen. But look where we are now. But I had these what if questions in my mind. Like, I've always been scared of public speaking. I asked, like, what if I say the wrong thing? Or I asked, what if people judge me for doing this? What if, people look at me differently? What if I even lose friendships over this? And those what ifs were holding me back from stepping out of my comfort zone and finally getting over that hill and, stepping out of my comfort zone and doing something that I want to do. And for a while, I was asking those, like, what if this? What if that? Like, what if in the sense of, like, what if this went wrong? But I didn't ask, what if this went right? And finally, one day I sat down and I asked myself, what if this is what God has for me? What if every time I sit down and pray and that idea Christian podcast pops up, what if it is because that's what God has for me? And then that kind of like twisted my perspective a little bit to the point where I looked at all those what ifs that were making me anxious, all those negative what ifs that were holding me back. I said, if this is what God has for me, that is more important than people judging me or losing friendships or people just looking at me differently in general. If this is what God has for me, this is more important than all those things. And something that, you could do for the glory of God is going to be more important than anything else in this world. So I finally, got to that point where I was like, if this is what God has for me, then this is what I need to be doing. And then stepped out of my comfort zone and started that thing. And then now we're 19 episodes in. And with that, we get all these negative what ifs, and sometimes you gotta, I guess you could say, well, not, it's like delusional in a sense. Like, you gotta like imagine like it going so much better than what you could ever imagine, because with so many things in life, God will do greater things than we can even picture, than we can ever imagine. Whenever I sat down and started this, I thought of like probably 5 or 6 people that I thought would like tune in every week, and it's been like at least double or triple that every single week, and it's been significantly more than I ever thought. And the show has reached more people than I ever thought, and God is continuing to work. And sometimes you just got to think like God will do greater things than I could have ever imagined. And if I continue banking on those, or continue leaning on those like negative what ifs that were holding me back, we would never be where we are at right now with the GC show. So sometimes you gotta, I guess, I don't know if it's like considered delusional, but you gotta think better. You gotta think better than what could happen. Like, if you think, oh, this could go this way, you gotta think, what could God do that's even better than that? Because He will do things that are so much better than you can imagine. So that was kind of like future tense asking the what if question, but now the past tense asking what if. You may be asking the question like, oh, what if this went different? Like, what if this thing in my life, this event maybe, or like going back to sports, what if this went different? And just know that if something didn't happen the way that you're hoping, it didn't happen that way because maybe God was protecting you from something, or maybe He was closing one door to open up another door. And what you got to understand with that is, maybe something didn't happen because there's something else better that is waiting around the corner. And maybe that corner, will take you a few days, few months, few years to get to that corner and finally figure out what that is that God has that is better than what you're hoping for. But God does have better things than what you're hoping for. So you got to trust in Him and trust in His promises in that, and understand that, what God has, maybe something that God took away, He will bring back something that is so much better, and you have to trust in that. So, I asked the question at the beginning, what does it look like to give our what ifs to God? So to give your what ifs to God, pray. Instead of asking all these questions, say, oh, what if this, what if that, and being like super anxious, trust in God and pray and say, God, will you just like give me peace and, help me to not question these things that are like filling my mind, but just trust God, like help me to trust in you, knowing that what you have is better and that your way is better and that you will make a way. and trust in his promises, knowing that, like I said earlier, that, God will do greater things than you can ever imagine. And if he takes something away or something doesn't go the way you're hoping, it's because God's got something better. And you need to trust in that. And focus on his goodness. That is so important, to focus on his goodness. And with that too, right, if you're asking those what if questions, take the future tense, for example. If you're asking like, oh, what if this goes wrong? What if this doesn't go the way I'm hoping? What you're doing in a sense is almost like doubting God, saying that, oh God, I don't trust in your plan. So like, what if this goes wrong? What if this goes this way? But if you fully trust in God, you fully submit to God, and you lean not on your own understanding, you won't have to question like, oh, what if this goes wrong in the future? Because you know that God will make a way, and you know that God's way is better than anything that you could have ever drawn up. So, if you're asking those what if questions, you're not trusting in God, and you're not trusting in his plan. So I want you to remember that when you're asking those what if questions. If they're bringing you anxiety, bringing you stress, maybe just don't even ask them at all, and just trust in God, saying, God has an amazing plan, and I'm going to trust in that and trust in his promises. So this is where we get to the point here where I'm talking about, for those people specifically who are thinking about, I want to start that thing. I want to go out and do, like, there's something I want to do in life. This is for you guys specifically. And it's just, I think it's good information in general, just for anyone who would want to hear it. So for you, maybe something has crossed your mind of something that you want to do. And one factor that may be holding you back, if not the only factor holding you back, is a what if question. We'll take going to the gym, for example. Let's say you want to start going to the gym, you want to start lifting more weights. But you think, oh, if I go to the gym, people are going to judge me, and people are going to look at me weird because I'm the new guy. Like, what if people judge me for being the new guy and not knowing how to use the machines? And, we think that, we tend to like focus on the negatives when we think of something in the future and ask those what if questions. But, well, it doesn't look like it, but I've stepped in the gym before. It's been a while. But, whenever I went in there, I was asking like, oh, what if people judge me? But I was just kind of like, we're just going to do it anyway, just because like, who cares what people think, right? And I went in there and I didn't know how to use the machine, and I asked this guy, I was like, oh, how to use this machine, and he was open to help. He didn't judge me for not knowing how to use that machine. He was willing to help me because like people in the gym are nice, and everyone is there to lift weights, and everyone knows that. And, everyone wants to see each other succeed in the gym. So, when we tend to make those like what ifs in our mind, we think they're so much worse than what they actually end up being. Like from my example too, with just starting the show in general, I had all those what if questions, like what if people judge me? What if people look at me different? And that's really not how it went at all. Like I've gotten so much more support and compliments about this show than I could have ever imagined. And like really there hasn't been hardly anyone that has like judged me for this show. I mean, I've gotten a few like rude, I guess they're like almost hate comments, but those positives, the positives have outweighed the negatives so much more than I could have ever imagined, and much more than what I pictured up in here. So what you picture up in your mind whenever you're asking those questions, those what if questions, things tend to go so much better than what you could have ever imagined. So I don't want you to let those what if questions get in your way. And another thing I want to bring up with that too is I actually saw this quote on Instagram. It was another podcast, and it was these two guys. And the first guy, he asked the second guy, he goes, what do you think is the most expensive place on earth? And the second guy, he's like, I don't know. First guy, he goes, it is not New York City. It is not London. It is not Tokyo. It is not Paris. It is not Los Angeles, California. But the most expensive place on earth is graveyards, because that's where $1 million ideas are buried. Think about that. Think about all those people who are really just like anyone in this world who has an amazing idea, but they just keep it up in here and they don't do anything with it. Like, think about if that idea that you have or something that you want to do could be something that ends up changing the world. Think about that. you hear people, they get to the end of their life and they're like, man, I wish I would have done this differently. Man, like, what if I would have done this when I was younger? And I don't want you to be asking those questions at the end of your life. I don't want you to be saying like, man, I wish I would have done this, or what if I would have done this? I know for a lot of you watching, you're around my age, in your teenage years. And if there's something you want to do it. You got to remember that you only live once. And if you don't take advantage of the opportunity now and start that thing, do that thing that you want to do, you might never have another opportunity to do it. So why not do it now? So that's something I want you to remember. I don't want you to take, even if it's like not necessarily $1 million idea, but really just any great idea. I don't want you to take that throughout your life and just leave it up in here. I want you to do something with that idea. Take that idea, put pen to paper, and then put paper to product. Do something with that idea. So as we get to the end, we get to the main point. The main point for this episode is this. The soul question itself, what if? It can make you anxious or it can be motivation for you, but the choice is up to you. You can ask these what ifs and say, oh, what if this goes wrong? What if that? Or you can say, what if this is what God has for me? What if this is what I'm supposed to be doing in this world? So that is the lesson for today. Of course, any questions, comments, or suggestions, feel free to let me know, or really just anything you want to tell me about. I'd be open to listen. I like getting feedback and stuff, or if you're have an idea and you want to do something, like, let me know. I'll definitely support you in that. If you want to start something, let me know. I will support you in that. And just anything you want to let me know about, like, do it. I'm here to listen. And of course, if you know of anyone who may need to hear this this lesson or any of the other ones, I'd encourage you to share it with them. Not so that I can get all the views, all the likes, all the subscribes, but so that we can point even just one more person toward Christ. So that's all I got for today. Thank you guys for listening. I'll see you guys next week. Be great today, and praise God.